The film begins in May 2020, in the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Connecticut Governor Representative Claire DiBella is directing an at-home meeting when she gets a secretive bundle. At Alpha Industries, researcher Lionel Toussaint is in a video call with his higher-ups, who are beseeching him not to approve the crazy thoughts of his chief, Miles Braun, as he is set to seriously jeopardize lives with his most recent creation possibly. Lionel is then sent similar bundle from Miles. At a party, supermodel Birdie J is being dealt with by her put-upon colleague Peg, as they get the bundle from Miles too, and Peg is attempting to get a plastered Birdie far from her telephone. At last, Men's Freedom's Twitch star Duke Cody is making a video with his sweetheart Whiskey when his mom lets him know he got the bundle as well. Claire, Lionel, Birdie, and Duke all bounce on a call to attempt to sort out some way to open the crate. After Lionel sorts it out, the remainder of the crate is a progression of riddles that lead to a model of a structure and a greeting from Miles to his confidential island for the end of the week. The last individual to get the bundle is Cassandra Andy Brand, who basically crushes the container to pieces prior to tracking down the greeting. Investigator Benoit Blanc is in a bath on a video visit with Natasha Lyonne, Angela Lansbury, Stephen Sondheim, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, every one of whom express worry for Blanc not leaving his in the middle between cases. Blanc's accomplice Philip then, at that point, calls Blanc to illuminate him that he has gotten a container. Blanc later joins the visitors as they show up at a harbor for a boat that will take them to Miles Island. Claire, Birdie, joined by Peg, Lionel, and Duke, joined by Whiskey, express energy at meeting Blanc for his renowned cases. Not long before they withdraw, they are told by Miles' collaborator to take in a sanitizer that will permit them to communicate without utilizing veils. As they get on the boat, everyone is paralyzed to see Andy showing up. On the boat, Blanc is told by Lionel that everybody is shocked that Andy is there since she had a somewhat scandalous run-in with Miles when he cut her out of a significant agreement. The visitors show up on Miles Island, where he shows up to welcome them, alongside an irregular visitor he has named Doral. Miles then, at that point, flaunts his home, the Glass Onion, which is named after a bar that the gathering used to hang out at. He declares that they will participate in a homicide secret where he is the person in question, and he gives them generally exceptional armbands to their rooms, and Blanc seems to meet Andy interestingly. Blanc then goes to Miles' office. As it just so happens, Miles didn't really welcome Blanc to the get-together, however he actually got the greeting. The visitors get gotten comfortable and go for the pool, drinking spiked fermented teas. During this time, Whiskey gives off an impression of being drawing near to Miles, even with Duke taking note. Peg approaches Birdie and advises her to converse with Miles about an individual matter, and Birdie remarks on how Miles was no one worth mentioning when she met him. Miles plunks down to give a little discourse to the gathering before Andy approaches rail against him and the others, since she realizes that they are locking onto Miles since he backs every one of their endeavors, Claire's disagreement legislative issues, Duke's Twitch profession, and so forth. Peg then, at that point, goes to track down Miles and asks him herself to lay off of Birdie, as the matter worries a sweatshop in Bangladesh that made the garments she produces, yet Miles isn't withdrawing. Blanc endeavors to smoke a stogie yet is frightened away by a caution. He then sees Duke getting Miles and Whiskey attaching in his room. Around evening time, Miles assembles individuals around for drinks prior to plunking down for the secret. Similarly, as the secret starts, Blanc very quickly derives that the eventual killer is Birdie, as she is situated straightforwardly opposite a sculpture that has a period-delivered crossbow that would strike Miles. Sufficiently sure, the bolt kills Miles, which irritates him however dazzles every other person. Miles goes to tidy himself up, with Blanc following him and saying, sorry, for demolishing the shock unexpectedly early, in spite of the fact that he clarifies that he has united individuals who all have real thought processes to need him dead. Blanc then sees a curio that Miles has outlined, which is a mixed drink napkin where he evidently composed the subtleties that prompted Alpha's turn of events. While the visitors keep drinking, Miles calls attention to that he has the genuine Mona Lisa borrowed from the Louvre since they need cash because of the pandemic. It has a touchy caution framework with a safeguard out in the open. Miles then accumulates everybody for another show. He has fostered a new, untested fuel source called Clear, which the whole glass onion is controlled by. Lionel lets him know this is insane in light of the fact that he wanted something like 2 years to test Clear before it very well may be uncovered to the general population. Andy calls Miles out once more, and she is stood up to by Duke, who tells her that she basically lost over the long haul. She leaves the party. Everybody proceeds to party, and Duke welcomes Miles' thoughtfulness regarding something on his telephone, which says could be a unique advantage and would score Duke a sought-after spot in Alpha News. Miles fixes a beverage and passes it to Duke, who starts gagging minutes after the fact. The others endeavor to help, however Duke kicks the bucket. The gathering begins to search for his telephone, however it's not possible for anyone to find it since it has quit signaling from notices. Individuals start to think that Miles was the objective and that somebody intended to harm him, and they additionally notice that the firearm that Duke generally has in his possession is absent. At the point when 10 o'clock rolls in, the lights overall around the spot start to go out. Whiskey comes in shouting that Andy stripped their room. Blanc pursues Andy in the murkiness, however similarly as they start talking, a concealed attacker shoots a firearm, hitting Andy. The remainder of the gathering emerges and sees Blanc remaining over her. He then accumulates the gathering in another room. The film then, at that point, hops back to when Blanc got the greeting. He was visited by Helen, Andy's twin sister, who presented to him the crushed-up puzzle box. Helen lets Blanc know that Andy is said to have ended it all days sooner, however she accepts that Andy was killed. Miles had removed Andy of the Clear bargain since she realized it was possibly perilous, however he went despite her good faith and got Claire, Lionel, Duke, and Bertie to affirm against Andy to remove her of Alpha totally. Helen brings up that them four were all initially dear companions with Andy and that it was her who acquainted them with Miles, whom they generally viewed as a failure. Just when he came to the top and aided them out did they out of nowhere care for him. In Andy's fury, she ran over the genuine mixed drink napkin, where she thought of the relative multitude of alpha thoughts that Miles took and made look like his own. Helen thinks one about the gathering harmed Andy and passed on her body in her vehicle to make it seem to be a self-destruction, as the envelope was absent from her home and there was no self-destruction note. Blanc concocts the possibility that he and Helen go to the island with Helen acting like Andy. Regardless of her underlying protests, she can change her hair and highlight to make herself look like Andy. On the boat, Duke and Bertie express treat for Andy's appearance, so Blanc mentors Helen on the most proficient method to stay away from doubt. At the point when they are on the island, Helen becomes inebriated and sneaks around on the visitors to assemble intentions and valuable open doors. She hears Lionel and Claire discussing how their professions are in a difficult situation with Clear, as Claire could lose likely citizens for sponsorship it, and Lionel hasn't made it uncovered that Clear would be helpless to spillage, which could cause monstrous blasts. Helen likewise drops a recorder in Bertie's sack, which catches her discussion with Stake, where Bertie owns up to approving an explanation where she would assume complete ownership for the Bangladesh sweatshops so Miles could remunerate her. At long last, Helen addresses Whiskey and discovers that she isn't happy in that frame of mind with Duke, who simply sees her as eye candy. It likewise turns out that he requested that Whiskey lure Miles to persuade him to let Duke on Alpha News. However, Miles doesn't need the terrible press since Duke attempted to showcase erection pills to adolescent young men. During the night party, Blanc advises Helen to start the contention that she would lose, so she can have a reason to leave the party and go through people group's rooms to search for the envelope. After Duke is killed, Whiskey gets Helen in her room and points a harpoon firearm at her, yet the lights going out offers Helen a chance to run. She and Blanc make up for lost time to one another before the aggressor takes shots at her. Helen gets by since she had one of Andy's handbooks in her possession, yet Blanc utilizes Jeremy Renner brand hot sauce to make it seem as though Helen is dead to the remainder of the gathering, which offers her a chance to proceed with her hunt. Helen tracks down the envelope in Miles' office, and she begins to get sympathies from individuals over Andy's demise, as it has recently been made public information. At that point, Blanc lets the gathering know that Miles isn't the tech virtuoso that he paints himself as, because of his utilization of malapropisms and other boneheaded thoughts. He goes further and lets them know through and through that Miles is the genuine executioner. Regardless of him, let individuals know that Duke erroneously got the glass implied for a significant distance. He straightforwardly gave it to him and furthermore took his firearm, where he sat tight for a potential chance to establish the weapon and let the lights go out, which Blanc in a roundabout way gave him the plan to do. The justification for Duke's passing was on the grounds that he showed Miles the article on Andy's demise, which he figured he could use to extort him with to get him into Alpha News. Miles put pineapple juice in Duke's beverage, realizing he was spooky susceptible to pineapples. Days sooner, Duke was nearly hit by Miles' vehicle as he was seen leaving Andy's place. Duke, Claire, Lionel, and Bertie all went to mind Andy yet tracked down no response. Miles had killed her since he found out about the email from Lionel where Andy was holding the envelope. Helen arises, cracking everybody out and causing them to acknowledge she is Andy's twin sister. At the point when she presents the napkin to demonstrate that Andy was the genuine genius, Miles consumes it, leaving them with zero proof. The remainder of the gathering is likewise tranquil to support Andy, so Helen lets them know they are shitheads. Blanc, having surrendered to disappointment, leaves Helen with a beverage. As Blanc had before said, Helen is all the more fast reasoning when inebriated. She downs her beverage and starts to break Miles different important things. The remainder of the gathering then, at that point, joins Helen in help and starts crushing things, until Helen lights a fire. She then, at that point, gives Miles the other thing that Blanc left her, an example of clear. Helen tosses it into the fire, which gets into the vents and makes a gigantic blast that obliterates the glass onion. Blanc and Dural watch from a distance while sharing stogies. As Miles' place catches fire, Helen chooses to take care of him one final blessing by opening the case to the Mona Lisa and allowing it to burst into flames. The visitors exit, with Miles chastening and ridiculing Helen, saying that she actually has no verification that Andy did anything. Yet she is content in realizing that she obliterated Miles' standing and whole business realm. The other visitors then consent to affirm against Miles, similarly as the police begin to make an appearance to the island. Helen then, at that point, joins Blanc by the water, and she shifts focus over to the sea with a fulfilled sneer.